of a journey made by a young Victorian housewife to the heart of the Bolivian jungle. Lizzie, an Amazon adventure.
Many races and many generations have grabbed at the treasures of the Amazon: quinine, wood and rubber. In 1896, at the height of the rubber boom, a young Englishwoman, Lizzie travelled through 4,000 miles of the Amazon, 3 countries and some of the wildest scenery on earth, to a remote part of Bolivia, where her husband was to manage a rubber estate and make his fortune. Nearly 100 years later, I was to follow in her footsteps. The Amazon has changed very little since Lizzie's day. I wondered if my journey could be as much of a challenge. Lizzie's progress up the largest and longest river system in the world took her 13 months, and an ordinary London girl became the first European woman to travel so far upriver. My quest was to follow her trail until I, too, reached her destination.
My dear Dad and Mama, we are steaming along in the Amazon. The weather is very hot, but always with a little breeze. The entrance to the river, although quite 4 miles wide, is very disappointing. It's thick, sandy water, though I've never seen such skies. If you saw them in a picture, you'd not believe it.
The mouth of the Amazon, Belém, was and is the jumping-off point for every expedition and enterprise, the outlet for all jungle and river produce.
Pescada branca. Pescada branca. ¿Qué es mejor? ¿Qué es máximo delicioso? Este. Obrigada.
You can't get anywhere in South America without a Mr. Fix-It, who knows where to find everything and how to bend the rules. Mine knew where to find a little magic in the market. Macumba is Brazil's version of voodoo, and the stalls cater for any money or love problem.
Now, there's a snake in that bottle over there.
You use it like a perfume to attract the good things to us.
Does she mean men?
Você significa isso atrai os homens? Yes.
She does.
Men.
Now, has she got something to stop me thinking about men at all for the next 7 or 8 weeks?
Já ofereci para ela,
Sim.
que é isso, é olho de boa.
Ok. Então vou tirar fora, por favor.
What is that?
Yeah, this Boto's eyes.
Boto's eyes.
Yes. You can.
Usa na bolsa.
This
Yeah.
is a fish?
No, it's a dolphin.
A dolphin?
Yes.
I think I'll have something else.
Yes? Okay.
Superstition helps to bind this melting pot of a society. There's an incredible mixture of races which adds to the overall confusion of new sights and sounds. Europeans flocked here in Lizzie's day. This splendid ironwork came as ballast from England. It seems ironic that ballast should be our most enduring contribution. 100 years ago, these houses were occupied by foreign captains. They created a lavishly supplied little Europe for their families while they went upriver to make their fortunes in the rubber trade. Belém is where we all prepare for departure.
Looks like feather, yeah?
I think this may hold me up
Yes.
between a couple
I
of
think
trees.
sufficient support you. But yeah, it's better.
It's much better quality.
Yeah, much better.
Yesterday we had 94 degrees of heat, so while we've been delayed by customs, I have had some more suitable outfits made for the trip. I can only wear my thin cotton dresses, and I even had to take the collars off those. I couldn't bear them.
Fortunes were made and lost in weeks at the height of the rubber boom. This was the Palacio de Pino, now a warehouse for mattresses. It was a rubber baron's extravagant folly, built the year Lizzie left Belém.
Dear Dad and Ma, now I must tell you the new way we are going to take. It will be a wonderful journey, everyone tells us, and I shall be the first English lady to take it. Our first stopping place will be Manaus. Then we go to Iquitos in Peru. From Iquitos, we go up the Ucayali and Urubamba rivers. Then we cut through the jungle till we come to the river Madre del Dios and on to Orton in Bolivia, where the estate lies. It will take us about 6 months. The scenery is grand. It is all forest. The trees are a tremendous height. We live very well, dining with Fred's employer, Mr. Vaca Diaz, at a table for just first-class passengers. I'm a swell. You don't know what a fuss they make of me. More than 100 Spanish immigrants are coming with us. They're packed like a lot of cattle down below, and the smell is dreadful. Sentinels have to guard them. They're always threatening to attack those of us who dine at the special table because they're not fed properly. Nothing happens. They make a great deal of noise, but they are cowards. Mr. Vaca Diaz will use them as labor in Bolivia.
A 1,000 miles upstream, Lizzie would have been as mystified by the meeting of the waters as I was. The clear, dark Rio Negro, colored by rotting jungle vegetation, and the light, muddy waters of the River Amazon run along side by side for miles without mixing. It took Lizzie 8 days to reach the first major port upriver, Manaus, a man-made jewel in the jungle, a city where the rubber barons flaunted their wealth to the world. The rubber millionaires imported Italian marble to build their opera house, just finished when Lizzie arrived, and French cobblestones to cover the Amazonian mud. Outside the theatre, they watered their horses on champagne. It was a city sublimely unaware of the jungle on its doorstep. Today, Manaus is attempting a second boom. It's a free port with tax incentives and duty-free trading. A centre of commerce, exporting black pepper, jute, lumber, and Brazil nuts. The Opera House is as incongruous now as it was then. It was no real surprise to see that all that splendour also doubles as a doss house. I went round to the stage door to see if it was any more lively inside. It was. Maybe not grand opera, but things were happening.
Manter uma boa velocidade pra tristeza e a saudade nunca mais me encontrar. Quero que esse vento forte que agita a mata e embravece o rio bata em todo meu corpo para afastar o desgosto de não ter você aqui.
On balance, I felt I'd rather hear some more Brazilian music. Pushing on now towards Peru, I had 6 days ahead of me on a crowded boat with only hastily acquired Spanish and no previous hammock experience.
Es verdad, no mosquitos en
Não,
el
senhora,
río?
não dá não. Só lá no interior.
Ah, bueno.
Aqui a bordo não, senhora.
Si piques mañana.
Não, senhora.
Bueno, ahora, como este.
Abre
o
a
este?
rede, assim, assim.
Bueno.
Aí, opa, pode deitar à vontade.
Magnífica. Perfecto. Oh.
The captain charges everyone differently and pockets the fare. For $20, no meals were provided. There was one loo between us all, and my hammock was sandwiched between 2 snorers. But the movement of the boat cooled me off. Somebody saved me from a tarantula that came out of a bunch of bananas, and the time passed agreeably as we chugged towards Peru. As the Amazon gets nearer its source, the boats tend to get smaller. I was now in a peki-peki, called after the noise of its engine. Piranhas, electric eels, and something called candiru, which swims up inside you and stays there, inhabit this black water. Yet it's considered the safest place to swim. I needed a different sort of Mr. Fix-It as the jungle came closer. Freddie could be described as a river-wise jungle boy.
Para un rato ahí. Chequea esta punta acá, Lolo. Chequea la punta si entra por ahí.
So far, this has been the nicest part of the journey. The forest is beautiful. Not a sound except the birds and insects. We send men hunting and fishing to keep up our stores. We have eaten stork steaks and wild duck and snipe. Some Indians live on rafts by the riverbank. They are almost animals in their habits, but very shy. We start at 7 in the morning, travel until 10 when we all stop to eat. Then we all bathe in the river. I also. I have taken to the dress of the country, given up corsets altogether. It is so comfortable and free. I've never felt so well in my life.
The floating slums of Iquitos, 2,000 miles upriver, cut off by the Andes, the most isolated of places. It may look picturesque, but the water's indescribably filthy, hardly classifiable as liquid, and natives drawn here by the hope of work live a desperate life. Pilar, aged 5, attached herself to me as unofficial guide, and quite simply I fell in love with her. Her situation isn't unusual. She was left alone all day. Her mother's a prostitute. Of all the tempting goods in the market, the only thing Pilar would let me buy her was a mango. She has rickets and probably worms because she's permanently starving. I'll be coming back to Iquitos, and Pilar's the reason. I can't do anything for her in the meantime except send money for food that I hope reaches her. There are a lot of hard things to come to terms with in Peru.
Muy fuerte, ¿ah? Sí. Hasta peligroso. Peligroso. Quando veio que pegou algo daqui, como ela chamaca bene, sua amigos dela chamaca, por isso me muero daqui. Sim. Mañana, neste café, ela chamaca. ¿Tú tienes nombre? No.
According to Pilar, these whopping great river monsters called pirakuru are babies. They grow to 7 or 8 feet and can upset a canoe. Iquitos is a dreamy sort of town. Not many big riverboats now, just the hammock boats and small traders. It's a town not teeming with lunch dates either. I got quite dependent on those iguanas. It wasn't always so quiet.
Since I wrote you last, I've been very gay. Captain Good Steamer is the first to run direct from Liverpool to Iquitos, and on his birthday, the captain had a party on board. The ship was decorated beautifully with Chinese lanterns. I was the guest of honor and enjoyed myself very much.
My own social horizons broadened when somebody tugged at my sleeve one night and invited me home. Sophia was born and bred in Iquitos, but she's always had a weakness for foreigners. She was married to one. She reminded me of Miss Havisham in Great Expectations. Time stopped for her when her husband died. She's totally unaware of the debris and filth. Their mosquito nets encrusted with 8 years' dirt.
This is a fruit, the name is tutumo. They use for like a basil. We saw it.
Her husband was a German spiritualist, and the supernatural comes easily to Sophia. She told me how she'd been clearing weeds in her garden despite a cripplingly bad sore foot when she discovered a small statue of the Virgin Mary in the undergrowth. Her foot was instantly cured.
But I hurt here because everybody saw in the shop because I wanted to show how I hurt my feet, and they say there is nothing, no mark is nothing.
Was it a miracle?
It was a miracle.
Every day she goes to the cemetery to visit her husband's tomb, so she's a rich source of graveyard gossip. She told me of a horribly businesslike arrangement. Bodies are turfed out if their families don't keep up the payments.
My dear Kruger, I come to see you with some good English friends. Un día celebremos vuestras misericordias en la gloria del descanso. Amén. Yeah. And so, Kruger, I must leave with you now. I will come someday again see you, my dear. So long.
I'm very busy packing this morning, and this afternoon I'm going to ask all the gentlemen to come and sit on my boxes because they won't shut. Most of our cargo is to be left here, and they've arranged a shop where they'll sell it. It is impossible the way we are going to take much cargo. The way the Peruvians work is wonderful. They load them like animals. Tremendous luggage they carry on their backs.
Like Lizzie, I loved Iquitos, and I'd made friends there. I'd have liked to have them with me for the tougher times ahead. I'm bound for the Ucayali River and southern Peru.
Now begins the best and most difficult part of our little trip. It will take us another 4 months from here to Orton. We've been exploring around the borders of the forest and followed up a jaguar's footprints, but he'd evidently crossed the river. We also came across several alligators. We shoot the wild pigs and eat them. It's the only fresh meat we get except turtles. Pork is a trifle strong. The water is too low for us to travel for a while, and we've stopped in a very lovely spot, quite wild. Every afternoon we rest in our hammocks. I do a little fancy work, which I'm thankful I brought with me. It would be more enjoyable if there were not so many insects, though. The wood is swarming with large ants and beetles.
After hours in the Peki Peki, Freddie guided me along a jungle path to a native village where we were to spend the night.
Is that what we get tonight? That's what they're giving tonight.
He explained that the stuff being carried behind us in the bucket was a potent drink of chewed manioc root, fermented in women's spittle, and it meant that everyone was getting ready for a party. There seems to be a direct link between poverty and hospitality. Juanita de Vasquez immediately asked us to stay. Her twin girls, both called Maria, one very bad and one very good, were getting into their party knickers because tonight was going to be the Mother's Day fiesta. Not an event I expected to find in the middle of the jungle. Mind you, my Polaroids weren't an everyday event for them either. Things certainly warmed up after 3 o'clock in the morning. That spittle drink was rather good. Eventually, the last drunks wove their weary way home.
Buena fiesta. Pasamos nosotros. Ok. Caserío.
Pancho. Pancho. Ven aquí.
It was quiet for the first time for 12 hours. Now it's time to get up. The main town on the Ucayali River, hustling, oil-prospecting Pucallpa, is like a cowboy frontier town at the turn of the century. But now lorries replace horses. With the oilmen have come new roads, which have made Pucallpa a centre for drug trafficking. It's a human jungle here, with a coarseness and brutality brought about by the possibility of a new sort of boom, if enough oil is found or cocaine exported. These were the first tribal Indians I'd seen. In Lizzie's day, they circumcised their women and deliberately deformed their babies' heads. But although these barbarisms are behind them, they're not better off in every way. They've become displaced persons, badly served by civilization, scratching an existence on the fringes of the town. Pucallpa was the last town we'd see for weeks. Below it, the Ucayali joins the Urubamba, powerful rivers rushing down from the Andes through a wilderness of jungle. Lizzie passed through territory controlled by the famous rubber baron Fitzcarrald. He promised to help them through this tougher country in return for rubber from Bolivia.
The Urubamba is one of the most beautiful grand rivers you can imagine. High rocks with forests growing to the very edge and springs coming down from them. There must be any amount of gold. It is all waterfalls, whirlpools, strong currents, rocks and trees. Mr. Vaca Diaz asked us to go in the launch, Adolfito, with him, but everyone advised us to go in a canoe, as there is no safer way of travelling in these rivers. I'm sure I am not born to be drowned, for we've been near it many times, but our Indians managed the canoes splendidly. They seem to enjoy the danger, and I must say that I did too. You get sort of excited and then don't feel afraid. Fancy going at the rate of 12 miles an hour amidst rushing waters, and if you strike a tree or rock, you're done for. We now thank heaven that we chose the canoe. For 3 days down from the Mishagua, the chain of the Adolfito broke, and the current took her, and she went down. And the most dreadful thing of all, Vaca Diaz was drowned together with Fitzcarrald, who was going to supply us with Indians and canoes for the rest of the journey. They found the bodies washed up on some trees downriver. Most of the crew had drowned with them. This has been a most unfortunate expedition. We're only a few left. We don't know now if the company will exist. We've no money, and we can only wait here in the jungle for someone to help us. I've had the blues dreadfully. There seems to be no chance of getting away from here for months. There are two tribes of Indians here, the Pinos and the Campas. We are now dependent on them for food, and they're friendly to us. Some Indians who'd been away rubber cutting said they'd been set upon by savages who were going upriver to attack smaller tribes. They capture all the children and sell them as slaves. These Indians give everything which they shoot and catch to us. We've had monkeys, parrots, and various other birds, which we're only too glad to eat. You must not refuse to eat with them, or they think you do not trust them. They call me always Mama. They're very clever and practical people. It seems a shame to interfere and try to criticize them. They're very happy as they are.
There are still unidentified tribes hiding in the interior. This terrain's remained invincible for hundreds of years. I could only manage this stage of Lizzie's journey in a light plane. The missionary pilots are the only people who know this desolate area well enough. A few others, though, have urgent reasons for living in such a remote and inhospitable place, and it takes a tough boat to combat the Mishagwa River. This one belongs to the Shell oil base at Sapawa, and I was given a lift by the boss, Tony Luscombe, an old jungle hand.
These are very tall trees here.
Yeah, many of them in this climax forest reach 150 feet or more tall, but they're quite dangerous to man. That's one of the biggest dangers in the jungle. More people die from these really tall trees than anything else out here because they come down unannounced. Many times you'll get just a little swirl of wind in the canopy and people don't even see it, don't even understand it, and the tree will all of a sudden just come down because the root system. Well, it isn't weak. The roots are enormous, but they spread out on top of the ground. They don't go into the ground, so there's nothing to hold them.
Are there many Indians still using this part of the river?
Many here, yes, because it seems to be a converging point of the many tribes of the area. And of course the mission attracts them, you know. I mean, they have a school there, they have other services, a hospital, and so the people go there. And of course they're trying to draw them in to have their influence on them.
And do they bury their differences once they get under the wing of the missionaries?
No, the priests there say the differences stay very clear, and they won't speak to each other. There's a lot of real, sometimes physical aggression between them, and they maintain the separation very clearly. In this part of the jungle, caiman come out in sun here, so...
Are they like alligators?
Yes, right. The anaconda, which is the world's largest snake, many times when the water's slower, will lay under the water, and when an animal reaches down to drink, they'll grab them by the nose and draw them into the water and strangulate them.
Tony dropped me off to spend the night at the mouth of the Mashagwa River, very near where Lizzie's boat had gone down. It's incredibly isolated, the only base for supplies for hundreds of miles around. I needed a rest. It was 110 degrees with 90% humidity, but I wasn't quite sure about this odd, watchful little village, torn between its own identity and the needs of the nearby oilmen. Sabah has the classic South American components of a brothel and a mission, chic by Jao. I don't know how it was I wound up in the brothel.
Que puedo hospedar para cualquier persona.
¿Ser sola?
Cualquiera que venga de cosas que venga. Entonces,
Bueno. Suficiente.
no, para que se lave bien, porque yo quiero verle más lindo de lo que
Soy
es.
grande, pero... Gracias.
Acá.
Aquí.
Acá. ¿Quieres jabón? Jabón.
Sí, sabón, oh sí, sabón. Si usted tiene, es mejor con sabón.
Jaboncito. ¿Qué tiene?
Gracias.
Que sirva con confianza la casa.
Get slightly too fascinated.
¿Le falta agua?
Bueno.
Me voy a quedar con mucho respeto.
The proprietor's attentions all got a bit much, so I took up Tony's offer of a bed at the oil base. Male chauvinism and wet tarmac really got me down. It's a good job you offered us a bed for another night. This was utterly depressing. I was marooned here and there was no escape, except by light plane. And all work on the base was suspended. There were no planes in or out. The weather was still too bad for my mission pilot to risk it, and without him as guide, I would lose my unique chance to find the remote tribe of Camper Indians, the descendants of the ones who helped Lizzie. I checked hourly on the weather conditions, driving everybody mad. The base was totally dependent on radio, and I was totally dependent on them.
Cromo, Orión 69.
Well, this is frontier. There's no question about that. I mean, there's Indian problems at times. They have problems between themselves. We have problems with them. In the period of when the rubber barons came out here, they enslaved a lot of the Indians here, and many, many thousands of these Indians died from malnutrition and just plain overwork, bad treatment. And this has been passed down through the generations of the people. And today we have to deal with the consequences, because these people are still very suspicious in different areas.
Residual mistrust, it's
Yes,
understandable.
exactly. And of course, this hasn't been helped any by the fact that the gold miners and the woodmen come in and do essentially the same thing even today, although it isn't on the same scale. It is much smaller scale, but they still kill Indians very readily or find ways to transmit disease to them and eliminate them. And
is the oilman's conscience clear on that front?
well, here I think so, yes. In Colombia, it's very, and in Ecuador, it's very well known that oil people hunt the Indians because they're much more seriously hostile toward the oil people, and there have been oil people killed as well, so they reciprocate. I mean, some oil people actually go out and you know, specifically hunt Indians. One oil man told me that they waited till they found Indians crossing the river and get midstream, and then they shot them there, you know, so they wouldn't be able to defend themselves or get out.
At last, after 3 days, Dave Simmons could get through to rescue me. He uses his great skill as a pilot to serve his Roman Catholic mission. He's the only contact some isolated tribes can ever have with the outside world. Flying conditions here are very hazardous. Treacherous weather, mountain ranges, and ahead, short, homemade airstrips. After weeks of brown rivers and flat, green country, I found the scene change completely elating. It was a landscape that should have prepared me for the extraordinary people I was going to meet. Forming a relationship with an undiscovered tribe is a long and painstaking business. The child of missionaries himself, Dave Simmons grew up with the Campa Indians.
Invariably you hear about a group from other Indians. Very rarely do they come out and contact you. So the process then is to find a related dialect, an Indian who will go in with you to make an initial contact. And then if they accept you, which at first sometimes they won't, and if at first you don't see them, it's because they don't want you to, and leaving gifts and withdrawing and going back a week later or 2 weeks later to see if they accepted the gifts. Invariably they're suspicious, and you need to earn a trust by showing them that you're different from the other people that they've come in contact with in the past, who have exploited them, who have shot them down without any reason at all.
This was the tribe that worked the rubber for Fitzcarrald. We must seem as strange to them as Lizzie did to their ancestors. The only Europeans they've seen are the missionaries who work with them. They paint their faces every day the same way, each with their own personal design. They believe it's a protection against the evil spirits of the dead.
Sí.
Polvo?
Sí, no es polvo.
No?
Sí, no.
Es una planta que...
Sí, una planta.
Sí.
Ah,
¿Un poco más?
no voy allá un poco más.
Gracias.
Bro, mira, bro.
Ajá.
Bueno,
Bueno.
acá es más bueno. Vaya por donde.
Gracias. Perfecto. Es medicina. Sí. I didn't wash the paint off my hand for days.
Está bien.
There's nothing much left to hunt. They survive by cultivating manioc and bananas, and they fish. There are traps a little upriver. The missionaries helped them keep their land. In the past, Indians have been easily exploited by Peruvians taking their land and bribing them into slave labor with simple gifts. It was like leaving Shangri-La, and we've been asked to keep the name of the valley secret in the hope that their lives can remain unchanged. On her way into Bolivia, Lizzie must have felt the Mashagua River was never going to end. Imagine the frustration of traveling by boat. Days spent getting round a loop, only to achieve about 100 yards as the crow flies. It took Lizzie 3 weeks to get to the landmass known as the Isthmus of Fitzcarraldo, a steep barrier between two rivers. Fitzcarraldo pioneered a rubber route to Bolivia by carving a trail across this ridge. It was terribly hard going, and there was the added danger of attack from hostile Indians.
I rode gentleman fashion on a mule. At first I was a bit nervous, but I soon found out the way to stick on, and he was so sure-footed. It took us 5 hours to cross over, and such a road you cannot imagine. It is simply a narrow path, all hills and thick clay which made it fearfully slippery. 5 times we had to cross the river, which winds around. The mules had to make 4 journeys to get all our luggage over.
The jungle's taken over now, and Lizzie's route is impassable. In a way, I was relieved as I looked down from the missionaries' tiny plane. It seemed so remote, so inaccessible. But I was also disheartened by having to turn back from her route on the Caspaiali River. I felt I was losing her trail and I might never reach Orton, her destination in Bolivia. This was my last flight with Dave. Only a bigger plane could take me the long hop out of Peru.
We left the Baradera 2 weeks ago and came downriver in some canoes which had brought the rubber up. We started at 6 in the morning and travelled till 5:30 in the evening when we pulled up for the night. We had 2 fine Indians, Noblemen they were, and very proud. They made the fire which they kept up all night to keep away the animals and hostile tribes. We've been eating all sorts of strange things and been jolly glad to get them. Large rats, tortoise, squirrel. I get so very hungry. Nearly every night we heard jaguars and other animals close by. As a rule, they never attack unless wounded, but I used to feel nervous all the same. There are about 100 rubber gatherers scattered about this part. All the women, boys and men have to go into the plantations and work alone. Each has so many trees to tap, and sometimes there's a quarter of a mile between each tree. Alone in the jungle for months, I should go mad. It is terrible work, and more so when you know the prices they have to pay for their food. A lot of them die of consumption for want of proper nourishment. The children here are so hungry, they take to eating earth. Off my head. When we least expected it, bang came a launch steaming round the corner. It was such a surprise. One of the directors, Nicholas Suarez, came to fetch us and take us to Orton. Our luck has changed. All our sufferings are over. Oh, such a place as Orton, you've no idea. After all the tumble-down places we've lived in, we now have the finest house in all these rivers. There are 6 rooms upstairs. Down below are the offices. Also, there are shops and warehouses on the estate. We are great swells, and the people treat us most respectfully. The French cook manages all the meals, so I've nothing to do but arrange my rooms and enjoy myself. I wish you could see the flowers we bring back from the jungle. The river and forest are grand to look at here. We are now King and Queen of Orton. We have 500 Indians at our disposal and about 500 Bolivians. Our estates go on for miles and miles. It is so beautiful to settle down again after 15 months of traveling.
Another maddening delay on my way out of Peru to Bolivia. Airport bureaucrats refused us permission to fly. It turned out they were confusing the initials BBC with PBC, which stands for Pasta Básica de Cocaína, or raw cocaine. I only discovered later that a hefty backhander would get us out.
The Indians are awfully queer people. They'll come and sit outside your room and stare at you for hours. This morning, I had 2 in my bedroom, while Fred was still in bed under the mosquito net. They admire my clothes, and my hair too. They're struck with my nose also, but I don't know whether with admiration or what. They seem very keen on my musical box, too. They don't like you to turn them away, but I did. I wasn't going to take my bath in front of them. They are affectionate if you are kind and familiar with them. I have an Indian woman who looks after me well, as a sort of maid. She won't let me eat anything at all soiled, and is so particular. We've been dressmaking. I set the fashion here. Everyone copies my dresses. I've some awfully pretty ones. But I wish I'd brought some lace collars. I've had to go in for corsets again on account of my position here.
Bolivia at last. It was just on the other side of this urgent little river, which might not look much, but it's a crucial border, a main artery for drug smuggling. I was a bit apprehensive about the crossing. I wasn't sure I was quite up to raffish Bolivia with its talent for revolution, 188 coups in 150 years, and its cocaine-based economy. And what's that in the river? But Lizzie's home was getting nearer and nearer. Inflation here was running at an incredible 30,000%, and these money changers line the bank with the arrival of the smallest craft.
Ahora es la misma rata para las dos, ¿bueno?
Muy bien,
Bueno, ahora 20 a usted y 20 a usted.
Ah, solamente 20, ¿no?
Solamente 20.
Muy bien.
Pero mañana más.
Mañana más. Ok. A la compra es a 2.50 y a la venta es a 2.70.
Sí.
O sea que $20 por 2.50.
It's lucky he doesn't know I'm dyslexic with numbers. Bueno.
¿Conforme? Vea, aquí 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900 y 1000. Es $1 millón de pesos.
Millón.
Es
Soy
$1 millón.
millonera.
$1 millón.
Bueno,
Aquí tiene otro millón.
You'd need a wheelbarrow to take home a week's wages if you could find a job. I felt an immediate time warp, back 50 years to dirt roads and a distinctly primitive atmosphere. Some distinctly primitive suggestions, too. There seems to be a permanent motorcycle scramble, partly wide boy high spirits, partly because nobody much can afford a car, except perhaps the fat cats like the new rubber bosses. Loading foul-smelling raw rubber is a grim occupation in any century, and as in Lizzie's day, the workers are certainly not the ones getting the money. It's a cripplingly poor country with only its coca crops between subsistence and poverty. The Bolivian government's agreed to fight cocaine, but people have to live, and the truth is they depend on the cocaine crop. Corruption is inevitably built in.
There's a large slave trade carried on in these parts. If your servants don't work well, they are beaten dreadfully. Even the men have 50 or 100 strokes sometimes, with a stick which cuts like a knife, and very often they are half dead afterwards. If they try to run away, they are punished more for that than anything else. It is true that you at home cannot realize the state of things here. The law counts for nothing in these parts. Everyone looks after himself. Fred has improved the business considerably, and we have a great many visitors passing through. As soon as one batch goes off, another arrives, and we entertain constantly. Last week, we had a government gent here with his suite. We had a great feast here to celebrate the National Day of Bolivia. One of the sons of Vaca Diaz has arrived from London to learn the business, and we introduced him to our neighbors. Later, we had dancing. I'm one of the best dancers here, and have to dance with 3 or 4 gents. I get very tired, but there's no help for it.
Bumping along towards true Lizzie territory, I'm within 100 miles of her home. We travelled in an incredibly prehistoric bus. It was soon after the rains, and this sort of thing happens rather a lot. Cachuela Esperanza, the Falls of Hope. This town was the headquarters of the mightiest rubber baron in Bolivia, Nicholas Suarez, neighbour of Lizzie's, friend and rival of Fred's employer, Vaca Diaz. Abandoned engines, the end of a dream. The huge rubber warehouses lie empty. When the English smuggled rubber seeds out of Brazil and established new plantations in Ceylon, they broke South America's monopoly and the Suarez Empire. But this elegant town has endured. It's the rubber boom in aspic. The buildings remain intact, if deserted. This was once an internationally famous hospital, ahead of its time. To me, it was completely evocative of that other, successful era. I could imagine those fortunes being made and lost. Cachuela Esperanza, a ghostly place, made me feel suddenly very close to Lizzie.
My dear Dad, Mama, and everybody. Your letters were dated March, but I didn't receive them until August. Isn't it a dreadful long time? I'm always longing for news of you, and England sometimes seems so far away that I have the blues now and again. The photos you sent are splendid. Louis is quite a young lady now, and Nellie's taller than ever. I do wish I had her here to care for. Next week, Fred starts on a long journey of 2 months to visit the different rubber estates. I can't go with him because there's no road, and he says it's too rough for me. It's too dangerous to be on my own while he's away, and so I'll have 2 Indian girls to sleep in my room. To while away the time, I take long walks in the forest, but always with a servant. I've had an Indian boy given to me of about 8 years, and he beats any one of the English servants as regards work. He's so affectionate. He cried at first, but now he seems fond of me, and I treat him as a sort of child and servant at the same time. I've forgotten what London is like. I shall be frightened to walk out alone when we return to England for our holiday. 5 days downriver, there's been an epidemic of yellow fever, and many rubber gatherers have been dying. People are coming to Orton to escape.
They still smoke the latex the same way as in Lizzie's day, and the rubber is brought now, as it was from her estate, to the port of River Orton, an hour by boat from Orton. I began to feel hot on Lizzie's trail again. The evidence is everywhere. The name of Vaca Diaz is still all over River Orton. The family looked at me everywhere, even from a mural in the local cinema. The clues mounted, and I finally tracked down Don Edmundo Vaca Diaz, grandson of the original. Por favor, es señor Edmundo Vaca Diaz. Ah, bueno. Buenos días, señor. Buenos días, ¿cómo está?
Buenos días, con la suerte.
Muy bien, gracias. Soy la mujer inglesa.
Pasen más.
Bueno, gracias. Soy la mujer inglesa que hace la misma viaje.
Ah, ya.
De Lizzie. His office was the very same one where the clerks kept the records in Lizzie's day. He showed me yellow ink cuttings and photographs of the period. Una lancha de Antonio Vacadillas? I persuaded him to show me a storeroom of his grandmother's furniture. He set little value on those things, but I did. Maybe Lizzie came to dinner here. Maybe Lizzie sat on this dining room chair. Getting a boat down the last stretch to Lizzie's home was not so easy. Since Bolivia is a landlocked country, it was rather a surprise to discover it has a navy. Perhaps it ought not to have been a shock to discover they had no working boats. They lent me a captain, hauled out of retirement, and a fisherman provided a boat. The first mate was all of 14. As I got nearer to Lizzie, I felt the first cool breeze for weeks. The landscape's quite different on the Orton River. The jungle isn't oppressive anymore. I could now see how Lizzie might have felt at home here. For the first time, I could reconcile Bolivia with a sheltered young English girl. Her estate at Barracon at Orton was Journey's End, the place I'd be closest to her.
¿Está Barracon?
Sí, ese es Barracón.
This was the avenue of mango trees that shaded Lizzie and her house.
Orton, January 1900. Dear father and mother, I don't know how to tell you, but it is only too true. Our poor Lizzie died on the 18th of last month. She took to bed with fever, and ere we knew where we were, her heart was attacked, and she passed quietly away. The whole river is mourning her, for she was the angel of the place. I am your sad and faithful son, Fred.
Now another house stands behind the trees. I wondered who had inherited Lizzie's gardens, Lizzie's views of the river, Lizzie's way of life. These are the new owners of the estate. They told me they're producing rubber exactly as in the old days. When I asked his name, Lizzie's short life seemed to have an extraordinary continuity.
¿Cómo se llama?
Osvaldo.
Osvaldo
Bacadillas.
Bacadillas.
Sí.
Buena familia.
So the wheel has come full circle. The great-grandson of Vacadillas lives on the site of the English girl's home. Lizzie is buried here, but her way of life goes on.
Lizzie's amazing letters can be read in full in this BBC book called Lizzie, a Victorian Lady's Amazon Adventure, available from bookshops.